Hello everyone, today I am here to talk all about the third book in the Arc of the Scythe series, The Toll. The Toll is the third book and final book in the Arc of the Scythe series by Neil Shusterman. I would show you the first two books, but I don't have them right now. My sister-in-law is borrowing them because I've gotten her obsessed with the series just as much as I have. So I have read the first two. Weirdly enough, I have not done a review on either of those books, which is really odd because they're some of my favorite books of all time. Basically what this video is going to be is my review of the series overall, and then I will get into in-depth spoilers about The Toll at the very, very end. So just so you know. So if you've heard about Arc of the Scythe, and I'm sure you have because it has really exploded here on BookTube over the past few years, I'm going to tell you what it's about and see if you would like to read it. So, the first book we have Scythe, which is right here. This book is about a dystopian future where we have conquered pretty much everything. We've conquered hunger, famine, poverty, even death. Like, the world is just a peaceful place, and it's all thanks to this AI system called the Thunderhead. So with this, since we have conquered death, we have to control the population because obviously if nobody dies, there's just an influx of people all the time. Then with that, we have Scythes, and Scythes are just regular humans that are trained and they glean people, which pretty much means they kill people, only they use the term for gleaning. Now, if you are a scythe, it is a very honorable thing. You have this robe, you're in the scythedom, there's these rules and regulations you have to follow, but each scythe is very different of how they glean, aka kill people pretty much. So basically, in the first book, we learned all about the scythedom, and we follow two main characters named Citra and Rowan. They get selected to be apprentices to be a scythe, and they study under a scythe called Scythe Series, and they learn basically of how he gleans people, of how the scythedom works all together, and things like that. So the first book I really loved. I read it a long time ago. I believe I rated it a 4 out of 5 when I first read it, but looking back on it, I probably rated it 5 out of 5. I just love the book so much. So I'd say if you're interested in dystopian futures and this sounds interesting to you, I would highly recommend checking out Scythe because it's just an action-packed book. And what's interesting is the whole scythedom of how it works, of how you have to do these rules, of how you glean people. You can't obviously target a certain culture or race or anything like that. You have to be completely unbiased. You have to select people who you think. And like I say, each scythe, and you'll learn this more into the series, gleans people differently. They select people differently. We learn about Faraday's method, and he really researches on the computer into the Thunder's back brain, because I should also mention that the Thunderhead, who is this AI system, who is very all-encompassing, very smart, he can talk like directly in your head. Imagine that. So Thunderhead does not have any sort of sway over the scythedom. He does not talk to the scythedom at all, does not communicate with the scythedom. Basically, they are two separate things. The Thunderhead can control like the weather and, you know, things like that, and can talk to people. But when it comes to the scythedom, he's completely cut off. Like, there's nothing he can do about it. They're two separate entities, if you will. And Faraday has to research of how to glean people. He goes on the Thunderhead's back brain, which is like kind of research, and he researches about which people to select, and they pull Citra and Rowan into this. And by the way, Citra and Rowan aren't really excited to be scythes. I don't think anybody really is up to being scythes, because usually, you know, when you see a scythe, you're like, oh, I'm going to be gleaned and things like that, and it's going to be the end of me forever. So the whole book is about Citra and Rowan and their feelings about being apprentices, and at the very end of the book we get these trials, and whoever, you know, wins will be the actual scythe, whether it be Citra or Rowan. So Scythe is just an amazing book. The first book really talks about the scythedom and how each scythe does things differently, and you learn more about the rules and things like that. So I loved it. I would highly recommend it. Like I said, I know it's got a ton of buzz. It's one of the most buzzed about series, and I will say I stand behind it. I did read it, I want to say back in like 2015 when it first came out, and when I read it, it was first starting to get a lot of buzz. It wasn't like fully hyped up quite yet, but I loved it so much. So Scythe, I really recommend, would highly recommend you read. So Thunderhead, I don't want to spoil anything for you if you just want to hear about the series. Thunderhead really talks about, you guessed it, the Thunderhead. So the first book, we really delve into the scythedom and figuring out, you know, how they do things, what are the rules, what different scythes are, things like that. The Thunderhead, really, you learn more about the actual Thunderhead. AI, did I say AI? Did I say EI? I forget. This AI system that can control everything pretty much. You learn about, you know, why they do things, how they can talk to people. You follow a plethora of characters. You also get introduced to some Scythes that are really scary. I will say, like, the true villain probably gets really introduced in the second book, and it's very, very jarring in my opinion. But the second book, I think, is my favorite in the whole series. I gave it a 5 out of 5. I loved it. Like, when I read Scythe, I loved it, and I don't think I gave it 5 at the time because it wasn't quite there for me yet, but Thunderhead was. Thunderhead was everything I wanted and more. It was action-packed. It made me think about things, which Neil Shusterman does. He really weaves in political things, cultural things, even religion, which I'm still hesitant about because I am religious, but he puts in all of that stuff, and it makes you think constantly. Like, when you're reading it, you're like, put these parallels together, and it makes you think all the time, which I love Neil Shusterman. He's a very skilled writer. He's obviously written a ton of series, and you know, this series does get a little jarring at times with the decisions people make and the decisions that these Scythes make. You think that this is not a rational or well thought out thing at all, like these people are kind of insane, and you really see that play out in Thunderhead with a certain side, and it gets very scary. Like, it's just like, whoa. But Thunderhead I love. So I say the first book, Scythe, it really focuses on the Scythe, and the second book, Thunderhead, really focuses on the Thunderhead, hence why you have the titles. Before I get into the Toll and tell you about my feelings about it, I love this series. Would I recommend you read it? Highly. I know dystopian is not as popular as it once was. When I first started BookTube, dystopian was like the jam. Everybody who's anybody was reading dystopian. Then it kind of filtered off, and then fantasy became more in the forefront. Dystopian's still there, but I don't think it gets read quite as much as just your standard fantasy. I'm here to say the Arc of the Scythe series is a great dystopian series. It's going to make you think. It's going to keep you on your feet. You're never going to know what's coming because Neil Shusterman weaves in all of these things, and you don't get to see them play out till the end, and it's amazing how he does that. And it's just such an intricate and interesting series that I think if you're a reader that reads it at 14, or if you're a reader like me that reads it at 31, could get a lot from it. So would highly recommend this series. Definitely one of my favorite trilogies and series of all time. Would highly recommend it. So when we're talking about the Toll, I'm going to tell you my brief thoughts without spoiling it before I get into actual spoilers. So this book is a beast. It is like 640 pages. I don't know how big Thunderhead was, but I know it was definitely not as big as this one. So when I first got it, I was a little bit, you know, scared because she's a thick one, but I really enjoyed it, but I didn't quite love it. I know you're like, oh, what? You love the series so much, but you didn't love the final book. And here's why. The first 200 pages were really dull for me, in my opinion. I was kind of like really struggling to get through them, if I'm honest with you. I just was kind of bored. They had to lay a lot of, you know, groundwork, because when it comes to series, you have to kind of, you know, remind people of things in the previous books in case you haven't read it, which I don't reread series, which I don't reread books, which is probably not the best thing. The first 200 pages were kind of, you know, a lot of groundwork. Also, some of our favorite characters weren't in the first 200 pages, which I think is also why I struggled with the first 200 pages, because we kept getting introduced to like these new people that I personally did not care about at the time. I'm like, I don't know you. We're in the last book. I don't have time for this. Why are you being introduced in the last book? Because I don't care. But after the first 200 pages, it picks up, and it picks up fast. Like, I read this book within 5 days, I think. 5 days is a lot for me for 640 pages. I'm kind of a slow reader now because mom life and busy life, but after those first 200 pages, I could not stop. I just read it whenever I can. I was invested. It got picked up fast, especially at the middle and towards the end. Action freak impact. I did not know what was coming. So I gave it a 4 out of 5 just because I have to be honest. If I really wanted to, I can give it a 5 out of 5, but those first 200 pages really kind of affected my reading, in my opinion. I just don't think they were amazing, and I understand that I understand that Neil Shusterman made these new characters, and you understand the importance of them by the end of the book, but for the first 200 pages, like I said, really kind of affected my rating and things like that. Overall, I still love the book. I still love the series. It was amazing. Just, if I have to be honest with you, the first 200 pages really kind of meandered a little bit for me, so that did affect my rating, which is why I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. Before, you know, I talk about spoilers, like I said, if you are starting the Toll and you're like, oh, do I love it or not? I do really enjoy it. I would highly recommend it. I think it was a great conclusion to a series. I'm sad to see the series end. So in case, you know, you're reading it and you're like me and you're like, these first 200 pages are really slow. It picks up, I promise. It gets amazing. amazing, I promise you. Overall, this series is phenomenal. I'm very sad to see it go. It definitely makes me want to read more of Neil Shusterman's work because he has a ton of titles under his belt and I want to read them all. But I love Arc of the Scythe series. These characters will stick with me forever. It's going to be one of my favorite trilogies of all time, and I will recommend it to everybody because it's such an interesting series. A book about a future where we conquer everything, but we have these scythes and they glean people, and we have this thunderhead. Like, there's so many intricate parts to it that all add up and is all just amazing. So yeah, I'll gush about this series a lot, and everybody else probably will gush about it because it's very overhyped, but in my opinion, I think it's worth the hype, and that's just my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt if you want to. So, let's talk about some spoilers. It's been a week since I finished this, so I could have forgotten things because if you guys don't know already, my memory is just ugh. But we're going to try to talk about the ending and things like that. So if you have not read The Toll, please do not watch any further. And also, if you have not read The Toll yet, or maybe even any of these books, I would love to hear if you are going to read this series now that I've talked about it. Did it spark your interest at all? Are you still going to stay away with it? Or have you read a book in this series and you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to continue on? I just want to hear your thoughts about it before I go into spoilers. So leave them in the comments below. So let's talk all about The Toll. Spoiler time. Like I said, the first 200 pages I didn't love because mainly Citra and Rowan were still in Endura in this like steel box thing, and I was like, where are they? I need them right now. That was my main problem with the first 200 pages, which makes sense because they're there. They have to be, you know, brought up from the salvage ship of Jerry, who was a new character that at first I was like, I don't care about Jerry. I don't care about them, but Jerry became a very vital part in the whole series, in my opinion, and I really loved reading about them a ton. So, but at the beginning I was like, Jerry who? And then we also have Faraday, and we also have, I forget her name, Marina, I want to say. They're in the land of Nod. There's an actual name for it. I'm just going to call it land of Nod because they're figuring out that there's the scythe thing there, and they're stuck because they need 2 scythe rings to open the door, and Faraday only has 1. And then basically, also, the Thunderhead is deemed to everybody unsavory, but he still talks to Grayson exclusively. So the Thunderhead figures out a way to like communicate with people, but not directly because they are unsavory, because he can't communicate with them directly. And he sends, I'm gonna have to look at the book a lot for names because I'm that bad at it. Lorena, I want to say, is her name. He sends her and a whole bunch of a team to Nod and to build something, and you don't know what it is quite yet. It doesn't get revealed to the end of the book, but he has these grand plans for this island that no one knows about, quite essentially, and he puts this team to work, and basically he can't talk to them, but they can be like, we need some tomatoes and fruit, and they can just say it to thin air, or maybe they can communicate with like this telegraph thing or a code, and he will send it to them. So we're on this land. Faraday's kind of struggling because he doesn't know what to do because he needs to go into the store to figure out more about the scythes and the founding scythes and more information about them. And then we also have the Thunderheads team kind of like building this huge structure on this land, and you're like, what the crap is it? And then we also have Jerry, and we have another scythe. I want to say, I forget his name, Scythe P, I'm just going to call him. They uncover Rowan and Citra finally. Yay, we're all there. We're like, yay, Rowan and Citra are finally, you know, there. But they're separated as soon as they get brought up because that is the true torture of Neil Shusterman, always putting our characters far away from each other. It's not fair at all. Basically, Scythe Anastasia is her name. Citra. I'm just going to call her Citra because that's what I know her as. She gets hidden, and then she has to really work up, and then she starts doing these broadcasts about really, you know, uncovering Goddard and uncovering the true sickness of him. Like, when you get introduced to Goddard in the second book, you hate him so much. And then when you get to this book, you hate him even more. The one gleaning he does where he kills 30,000 people, like, that was when I was like, I've never like disliked and hated a character more, I think, than like Voldemort in a series, because he was just the true definition of evil. He was like, honestly, whenever I read about him, I just thought of Hitler the entire time because of what he did. He targeted a culture and a race. He wanted to kill people in mass quantities. It was just horrendous. horrendous to read about. Like, Goddard was an amazing villain because of the way Neil Shusterman wrote him, of how much you loathed and how much you hated him. He was phenomenally written, I'll tell you that, but I hated him so much. You have Goddard, and he's like the freaking, I don't know what it's called, but he's like the boss of all the Scythes in mid-America pretty much, and he's getting people to fall under his ranks, and you're just like, who would follow this sick man? Who would? Which you can also be led into politics, much like today, if you want to do the parallels. Which I'm not going to get into. I'm not a political person. I don't like talking about it and things like that. So let's keep that free in the comments of today's and how they compare and things like that. We don't know exactly. I'm just, whenever I think of Goddard, I also think of Hitler, okay? I just want to be honest with that. But we have him, and we have people following him. Some people are starting to really not like him, and it's getting pretty bad. And we also have Rowan, who gets into the Goddard's possession, and then basically, I'm going to fast forward to the end. We learn that the Thunderhead is building like this colony of spaceships and stuff to go to a different planet to repopularize this planet, because we learned back in the day when Goddard was just a really beginning size that they went to like the moon or another planet, forgive me on that, and they gleaned a whole bunch of like people and stuff like that to make it like kind of the whole planet uncolonized, because they knew that if we went and moved to a different planet that we wouldn't need size anymore, and they didn't want that at all. That would have been a bad thing for them. So they decided, Goddard and some other sides decided, let's glean these people, and then the Thunderhead can't really be, you know, involved with it because they're separate things. The Thunderhead can't control what the Scythe does and can't have any business with it, and then we could just say this planet was unpopular, like uncolonized, so you can't really go to it, so they can continue to do their Scythe business in, you know, on Earth pretty much. And that whole reveal, like, I was just like, wow. I didn't see it coming, didn't expect it. I thought it was phenomenally done, and I can't believe that the Thunderhead's rebuttal, like, just kind of, he broke the rules. He broke his own rules. He broke everything. And he's like, you know, no, I mean, Thunderhead's just idea was to build these rocket ships, go to a different planet, colonize it with all of the gleaned Tonists who were killed, and put different memories in them of people that were alive like way back in the day, which is just I can't believe it. Can't believe that happened. And finally, I think my favorite part of the whole series is when Rand finally killed Goddard. I've been waiting for Rand to do that forever. Like, I've been waiting with bated breath since the second book. You saw Rand, and you saw that she's not the best, but she's got some sort of smartness in her. She knew things were wrong. She knew things with Goddard were not going very well. And especially the whole Tiger thing, like Tyga, I feel weird saying his name, Tyga. She had feelings for him, and then Goddard, you know, pretty much killed Tiger and used his body and just put his head on Tiger and used Tiger's body to live, which is just, Goddard is, what? And then at the end, Rand finally gets her head back on straight, and she kills Goddard finally, thank goodness. And then she awakens Tiger, and I think it's pretty much Tiger's body, but he has a different head. And it's just that's gonna be interesting how that plays out. But I think we all were clapping a freaking ton when that happened, when Rand finally killed Goddard. Like, I've been waiting that forever. So we have the end that happens, and then we have Citra get really injured, and the Thunderheads basically says that, or he has these robots now, I think one's called Cirrus, that they can't do anything for her right now. They're gonna have to, you know, put her to sleep for like 120 years till we land. Then he can officially, like, you know, revitalize her and things like that. And Rowan's like, crap, I want to be put down with her, and I don't want her to be alone. And then he changes his mind, and he's like, okay, I'll stay awake for these 120 years, but I'm gonna turn back a corner at the end, which I'm just like, these people never get a freaking happy ending. Like, Citra and Rowan are always apart. You never see them together, like, ever, except for in the first book. After that, it's pretty much they're alone. Like, they're always thinking about each other, but they have to do their own crap because they're both battling their own battles. And then finally, at the end, we see them together. They're gonna go live on a planet together with all these people, and then Citra gets, like, hurt and killed, pretty much. And I'm just like... But then at the very end, Citra is finally awakened, and she sees Rowan, and there's like a different moon, and like things look different. Rowan looks different, and he's like, how long has it been? He's like, not very long at all, but it's been 100 years, and the dude's waiting for her. If that ain't true love, I don't know what it is. So am I happy they got a peachy ending? Yeah, I'm happy because they went through a freaking lot. Whenever there is a pretty good ending in a very dystopian dark series, I'm okay with a lot, honestly, because I've seen the characters suffer enough that I'm like, they deserve this. So there's that. Also, the very last thing, a couple of things, is the Scythedom. So when Faraday and Anastasia, Citra, open the door, they figure out that there's this thing you can do with the scythes that the founding scythes put together, and you can, I don't know if it's a button or whatever, they reenact it, or they enact it. So basically, it eliminates the need for scythes, and which is why it's kind of like a fail-safe. They don't want to have to use it till they ever have to use it, and nobody really wanted to know about it, you know, especially Goddard and people that really love to kill people, which is a whole thing about the scythes in itself of whether you should have the authority to kill people or not. Ugh. But anyway, so this failsafe pretty much means that there is this virus that's going to go through and select completely random people every 20 years. And it might be like the measles, cancer, things like that. Things like human viruses, and they're just going to die, unfortunately. And that is going to be the way to control the population. This will happen once every 20 years, and that's the way to keep the population at bay, which is why we won't need scythes anymore. So now Faraday, when he goes to people's houses that are dying, when the door opens, he does not get faced with a lot of fear and resentment. He actually gets welcomed in and comforted because he is going to bring comfort to the ones that are dying, and he's going to help them, you know, die peacefully and not in pain. And people, now scythes are really revered and really loved because they bring comfort to the dying, and that is something that Faraday has decided to start doing. Other scythes have really been on board with. The new Scythedom, which is like the old new Scythedom, are really not on board with because like they were in it for the killing. And I really loved how Neil Shusterman did that, how he made the scythes kind of inactive and didn't want them anymore, but instead made them comfort the dying and made them a good thing at the end, and not killing people, but helping them go peacefully. So I loved that. The ending was phenomenal. The Thunderhead too, oh my goodness. When he took over Jerry's body, when they took over Jerry's body, I was like, this is not okay. But when the Thunderhead was feeling their feelings with Jerry, like seeing things and how beautiful it was and how they could have been selfish, like this was probably the first book where an AI system like was actually pretty good. I was very nervous about it the entire time. I was thinking like they were going to do a religious thing with like him being the god, but I'm glad they really didn't do that, in my opinion. I don't think it went off. I thought Thunderhead really made very conscious and very well decisions for an AI system. Usually that gets botched up very, very quickly in like sci-fi and dystopian books, but Thunderhead was like the hero of it all. Who would have thunk it? But it happened. Like, he put all these people on a different planet. He made, it was amazing. So when, yeah, and then when Grayson, you know, talked to Thunderhead, said, I don't think I can talk to you anymore because you took over Jerry's body and they didn't accept that, and, you know, I deem you as unsavory now. And I was like, I felt really for the Thunderhead, but I also felt very proud of Grayson, which is a long video because there was a lot to unpack in the Toll, and I didn't even get to a bunch of it. There was just so much going on. Overall, I love this series. I would highly recommend it. I would love to hear your thoughts on the Toll. Did you love the ending as much as I did? Because yes, it did wrap it up in a nice, neat bow, which I wasn't expecting because Neil Shusterman like kind of guts you sometimes with writing, so I wasn't expecting that. But I'm happy because all of our characters went through a lot, and yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts about it. I'm so sad this series is over because it was so, so good, but I'm so, so happy to have read it. So yeah, share with me all your thoughts down below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.